my peers? Welcome to another episode of the Just Show Up podcast. Last week we talked about sports. Now we're going to apply a little bit of the mindset perspective from last week and now bring it into the gym for this week when we talk about how we use the term scaling when it comes to like modifying workouts, or how we just really use that term in a way to give us sustainability within our CrossFit journey. So let's get into our 3 breaths. Let's talk about our topic. We're gonna have a great one today, all right? Sit up tall, find your space, and just be, right? Us doing right now, wherever you're at, whether if you're working, reading, something here where you can just focus on your mind and your time. And all you gotta do is just come back to center. Come back to your breath, never leaves. Let's take our 3 breaths. Go ahead and inhale through your nose. Hold. Exhale. Breath in. Hold. Exhale. Last one. 3, 2, and exhale. All right, Joe, break it down.
All right, so this old school quote goes back to 2002 with the founder of CrossFit, Greg Glassman. He says, "The question regularly arises as to the applicability of a regime like CrossFit's to older and deconditioned or untrained populations. The needs of an Olympic athlete and her grandparents differ by degree, not kind. One is looking for functional dominance, the other for functional competence. Competence and dominance manifest through identical physiological mechanisms." So, of all if you go through the bank of CrossFit quotes, this is probably, I think, the most powerful, just in saying that, what we do in here is truly for everybody. We say it all the time. Everybody can do CrossFit. CrossFit might not be for everybody, but your grandmother, your grandfather, or maybe yourself, if you haven't worked out in a long time, you still have the same physiological needs as a high-level Olympic athlete, professional athlete. It just comes down to, what exactly are your, the mechanisms in which you go about it. What exactly are you looking to, how will you scale? How will this apply to you? So I think that just we're all humans. It's just that interconnected common goal just to be healthy.
Yeah, and he says functional competence, which is really relative, right? We're going to talk about relativity and how, every time you're here, how you go through your experience truly is a relative experience, and how you want to achieve and what your goals are and what you're actually physically capable of within this moment in time. And if you just go into this whole quote, if you really listen to this again, I just want to talk quickly about Greg Glassman, because he truly is a pioneer in the way he thought about how CrossFit was going to change the world. And, he gets a bad rep sometimes from maybe old school affiliates, or maybe if you look him up now on Google, he might get a bad rep, but he truly, the way he thought, and if you ever went to or saw, there's so many ways you can look up his lectures now, where he was just so passionate in the art of CrossFit, from how it's produced in an affiliate level with the workouts, the programming, the coaching, and then his bigger mission of how it really affects our health, both on a physical level and then a physiological level of, working against chronic diseases. And kind of getting into part of his quote where he talks about, different from degree but not kind. Talking about some of his lectures, I was just this is perfect, because I was going through one of, there's an Instagram account called the CrossFit Book. And I highly recommend, if you really want to see Greg Glassman at his finest with some of the quotes and articles and lectures he was putting out back in the day, it's just fascinating to see what was going on in his mind as he was bringing this to become a worldwide enigma of fitness. And this one particular clip just really hits home. And it was kind of funny because he said, you know, I'll just use myself for an example. So if someone comes into the gym, and this actually happens to me a lot, I'm not trying to boast myself, but someone comes to the gym, they go like, oh, I want to look like you. And the person during the seminar was asking Greg, like, well, hey, if someone comes in and they say that to me, like, how do I become honest with them? You know, the honest thing we would probably say is like, well, listen, you know, I'm completely different than you. This is not how it works. Like, you better think about long-term progression. You know, that's not what we're thinking about. Just day by day, scaling, all these things. And then Glassman goes to respond to him. He says, you know, you tell them that they're gonna, like, I'm gonna make you look like Rich Froning. And if you guys don't know who Rich Froning is, he's basically the legend of CrossFit competition, the CrossFit Games. And the reason why Greg says this is because he wants to create this idea of achieving.
Yeah.
He wants to create this idea of like, you have a lot of potential. Now, Greg, knowing in the back of his mind, he's gonna be like, well, this is probably not going to happen because of the steps and the levels that you need to be able to actually get to that space. But it ended up being a really, really funny part of this lecture and the seminar, but also really magnificent to see like how he really approaches from an individual client perspective of getting them into a mindset with their progress. And this kind of goes into our topic for today when we talk about scaling, because last week we talked about, you know, sports and achievement and competition and how there could potentially be a negative downside to a positive intent. And the whole idea when it comes to this term scaling in the CrossFit community is to create a positive intent for something that might feel like it's negative, but in reality there's really none of that thought going into this process of scaling.
Yeah, I mean, scaling is, you know, I feel like different gyms have different perspectives around it. Like, there's a lot of gyms where, you know, the ultimate goal is to like look at the whiteboard, what's RX, and like, that's what you want to do. Like, we really don't have that much of that culture here, which I think is a good, and there's a lot of like the work that you put into it. But I think that what's most important with scaling is just like really understanding what it is. Like, I wonder, like, we talk about scaling, we give scaling progressions in here every day in class, but like, what does it really mean to scale? And like, to me, scaling means that you are modifying movements or weights or any sort of progression to hit the desired stimulus, to hit full range of motion, to have a set stimulus. This is the stimulus for today's workout. How are you going to get that stimulus? Depending on, one, your physical fitness, and two, possible injuries or anything you got going on, any limitations. So like, just having a full idea of understanding like what is scaling, rather than just thinking like, oh, you're not doing 135/95, let's do 95/65. Like, what is the point of it? What are you doing?
Yeah, I think that's really a great definition of how you guys would put it. I mean, it's something that you hear us say all the time, and you're like, well, what does that truly mean? So kind of going into, you know, the pure sense of it, like you said, it just means that you're modifying something, right? And there's a pro and con to framing the idea of scaling in that kind of way, because it starts to create this whole culture shift of like, well, you know, I'm always modifying all these things. And just a little bit more background, like CrossFit really is the fitness program and fitness culture, fitness brand that made this term a thing.
Yeah. And
again, for all good intentions, because really what CrossFit does, I mean, its original branding was like forging elite fitness. And, you know, that might come off in a way that's like, wow, I'll never be able to do this. And yeah, like CrossFit in its essence demands us to look at our physical human potential in a way where like we can achieve, we can improve, we can do so much more than what we actually think. And So when CrossFit was developing these workouts in the early 2000s, and you're seeing gymnastics paired with weightlifting, paired with monostructural movements, and all these variants and variety of ways, like, yeah, it's hard.
Yeah.
And so we want to come back to the true model of CrossFit, which what you're saying is like to make it relevant for you to achieve what's supposed to be achieved. And this term scaling really was to bring this about, right? When Glassman would talk about this idea of scaling and teach it in the level ones and bringing it about with his articles and his programs, it was to really have us look at this bigger picture of like, I have something that I can actually work on one day. Going back to his like Rich Froning thing, or someone comes into the gym, maybe I should just sound like, you want to look like, yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
I'll get you to look like me. I'll get you doing the things I'm doing. Here's what it's going to look like. Here's the work it's going to take. Are you willing to do this? And if you do, you have this potential to get there. But what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to look at things from this perspective where I need to scale and make things relatively successful for me in this moment in time so that I can achieve.
I think one of the biggest challenges for beginners is that learning, although scaling makes progressions easier, learning how to scale takes a long time. Like, you really need to learn about yourself, like learn about like how you move yourself as an athlete, like your strengths, your weaknesses. Like, I personally think like scaling is a great skill that really increases as you just stay consistent. Because someone new comes in and, for example, today's workout, one of our part B had 60% of what you did for part A. Like 60%, knowing those numbers, like a lot of it could just be totally foreign to people. And like it is a process to learn how to scale appropriately, because it really means that like you have to be super aware of not only like how you move, but also your body and how you respond to different stimuli and like how different workouts make you feel. So it could take, honestly, like, be patient with scaling too if you feel like it's hard for you to find the right progression that feels, like you're getting the appropriate stimulus, because it takes time to really hone in that skill.
Mm. Well, yeah, and I think the bigger thing is kind of going back to, CrossFit being a program, like you said in the very beginning, that's made for everyone, right? We're coming back to this idea of like, we want to bring the human body back into resilience, of being capable.
Yeah.
And the idea with the workouts, what you guys see here on a day-to-day basis, are always gonna, like, you see things as written, and majority of the time, you're probably looking at the workouts like, wow, like, I can't do this, right? We're kind of going into this mindset, I can't do this. And that's really the intent, right? And I think if I always just wrote workout sort of CrossFit as HQ on the main site, or in general, overall, worldwide, we just put out workouts that are never really setting a bar. And that's where we got to kind of go back to like our conversation last week, right? Like, is having, something like a goal and achievement valuable? And the main answer is yes. Like, we want to have a bar set of what we can achieve, and that's the idea with a lot of these workouts. Like, you're going to see things, and a majority of the time, you're going to need to have this mental approach of saying, okay, well, I know I can't do this, but where can I start, and where can I still get a desired effect that's going to make me feel fulfilled in this moment, that's not going to make me think about, well, oh wow, I'm lesser than somebody that does this, because this is where the con can go. And how do I also think about like, this is going to make me feel like I'm a capable human being, quote unquote functional, after I leave the gym, to allow me to go into my life with a little bit more energy, a little bit more strength, stability, alertness.
Yeah, there's always like this battle, there's this battle with the ego when it comes to scaling, especially it doesn't really affect the new CrossFit demographic, because usually if you're new, like, most new people are very self-aware that they're still learning skills, and they're happy to kind of, dial it back and learn the progressions, learn the skills, yada yada. But if you've been in here for a couple of years, like, that's where it always gets a little bit challenging. And I experience, like, I'm guilty as charged. Like, I can RX most of the workouts here, but
Yeah.
sometimes like there's something like, for me, like if we're repping out, like I'll see like, hey, 185 power cleans, like, yeah, I can do it. Can I do it efficiently? No, but I want to. And it's just like, there's always that battle. And I think it's interesting that like ego versus stimulus, like what do I want to do? And it's like, sometimes I'm like, man, I should have done 165.
Yeah, I mean, this is like my love-hate. I don't want to say hate, but my love challenge with CrossFit as someone who creates a program for community that's been following the methodology for all these years, and this whole idea of like being attached to RX, right? Doing things prescribed. And yeah, majority of the time, like this whole RX concept notion is really more relevant to those who've been doing CrossFit for a long period of time. But we make it a thing here, right? Or I make it a thing here when you guys have workouts and you see on the monitor RX. And again, we're kind of coming back to this idea of, achieving, but also reframing, scaling as an important part of your process. And yeah, I'm sure it could be mentally challenging if you're looking at all these workouts every day and you're like, I'm scaling, I can never do RX never. And like, yeah, I'll maybe throw in workouts where once in a while where everybody can do an RX. If it's something super simple or if the weights are intended to be super light where most people can do. But the mental approach to when you come in here and scaling really has to come down to like, detaching from this idea of RX and knowing that it's going to be here, it's just part of what we do. But the bigger picture is like taking this whole ego concept out of it and really doing this mindfulness reflection of like what do I actually need in my life? What do I actually need in this moment in time? And like, can I balance the idea of like knowing when to push myself or knowing when to just be like, hey, just ride it out. I'm going to scale so I can achieve something for today and always know that like, can I come back in the next day feeling somewhat refreshed, ready to go and continuing to work out versus do I have to RX or try to get close to RXing or push myself when I really shouldn't or need to at this moment in time and then wreck my body for, the next few days. And this is, part of where like you could be coached through this process, but our goal is to really have you become your own coach. The goal is to have this mental and mindfulness understanding of yourself, what your goals are with the open-mindedness to achieve, but also with the balance of being in the right mindset day to day that allows you to show up consistently, allows you to move well consistently, which we'll talk about like that's being the priority, and that allows you to have, day-to-day success.
Yeah, when it comes to that balance, I think most of the time, the biggest challenge for people when it comes to RX scaled weight is most of the time, usually the biggest challenge is choosing to like take a step back and scale. However, I do think it's also important to discuss sometimes, especially people who are experienced, there also is the balance of sometimes getting out of your comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of athletes who move really well, have been doing this a long time, have great body awareness, and they could do a scale workout and they crush it. They get a great workout. They might be meeting the stimulus great, but it's like, as a coach, you see that person, you're like, I know that like you could probably challenge yourself a little bit more, and I don't care if you're slower. Like, I don't care if your form slightly deviates. Like, I want you to sometimes make that step and get out of that scaled, like, like there's definitely a balance. I think that's where like a coaching comes into it, like encouraging, just to like, because you don't want to be in that, like you said, like our goal is to keep go. We don't want to be in that like one set progression forever.
Yeah, that's where like, you'll have Coach Marco bark at you or maybe do one of those trickster change of weights in the, when your back's turned and next thing you know.
That's intern Alton on Wednesday.
Did you sneak one on?
He got back from outside, he looked at his landmines, he was like,
that was a little heavier, yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's that mindful approach, right? I mean, we talk about, there are people that may do too much scaling and they finish the workout like way too quick or do too many rounds because it was, not at that right stimulus. Maybe they scale too much, and that usually does happen a lot of the time. And kind of going back to like, well, what's the priority first? Let's talk about the program real quick. I'm not shifting gears too much, but so to give you a little background in terms of like when I program workouts day to day, week to week, month to month, the program is, I would say, tailored towards like your higher level of athlete or physical capable individual within the gym. And the reason why this is a good tool, and this is how I've been taught, and this is also very much encouraged within CrossFit affiliates, because it gives you a bar to set. You know that there's a realistic tool for at least one person. That's, not saying that the program's for one person, it's for everybody, because everything that we do day to day is designed for everybody. In terms of the progressions with RX, whether if it's loading, skill, distance, time, all those things, they are set for a person that could potentially finish or complete at those. And now we have at least a community threshold, right? If I were just to say that person would be like Coach Ryan Gravius, like he's been here from day one, made a lot of progress. Like he would be somebody from a male perspective, and let's just say like female perspective, like we have Steph Vitro, MK, Courtney Worth, like we have women like Courtney Ringston, like some of those women who like made quarterfinals, for example, that really, or like Coach Amy, for example, when she was here, like that would be like a threshold of individual where we want to tailor towards them, because that now gives our community a boost. Like it's basically a pyramid, right? And again, most of our community and people that are doing CrossFit are at that very base level. And then there's a lot that kind of like wedge in between, where like some might be able to do an RX workout towards that higher end, and most might have to kind of go down, or they're trying to navigate that space of like, which side am I on? And again, that's a helpful tool for the program, because again, it gives us that achievement level. Not saying that everybody's going to achieve that, but and sometimes there might be workouts where it's like tailored towards everybody at the bottom, and then the top kind of have to like gravitate towards that, like an RX plus or something like that. And you guys will see that in the workout. So if you're kind of thinking in my mind of like how I'm trying to balance all these, but it's much easier to go from the top and then pull from the down up. And so like a majority of our program, a lot of those bottom people, winner people have to think about like, how am I going to modify this to give me a similar effect to those who may do something that is a little bit more achievable of that RX progression. And really what I'm trying to get at here is this whole self-awareness practice, this idea of how do I really know where my level is at. And if you're somebody who's brand new into the gym, and maybe we get this a lot of people like are brand new, kind of like worked out, they have a little bit of a background of exercising, and they have a little bit of like ego, maybe they're just really just completely unaware, and they just need to like come in with the mindset of just say like, listen, modify everything, scale it. I don't care how late it is, how like mundane some of the basic skills are. Just teach your body to flow in a program like this in terms of volume, the reps, the rhythm, warm up, and then give yourself time. Like there's really no rush, even though you might do 3 months to start. Like we're looking at, 5, 10, 15-year lifestyle for you.
Yeah, and like mentally knowing that, hey, like this programming is like meant for the fittest, it's meant for the best. Like it shouldn't feel like a loss to scale. Like it should be, when that time comes when like, oh, you notice like, hey, I did make a progression. Hey, like maybe I can finally like do a workout as prescribed or do some elements prescribed. Like it should just be more encouraging, because like you are setting that high bar for yourself. Like just as we set that high bar for everybody who walks in here, and just really, I think it's just important to one, not view a workout as black or white. Like, don't view it as like, what time did I finish at, how many reps did I get? But when you're done with it, just think about like, what did I get from that workout? Like, what was that workout's impact on me, on like how I'm feeling, on my growth? Because there could be, I could do a workout, maybe that is RX, but I could not meet the stimulus and it really wouldn't matter.
Yeah.
So it's just like, what are you getting out of it?
Yeah. Yeah, I do want to talk about the main thing of like what you should be getting out of majority of every day is like being more aware of how you move physically. And this is kind of where I want to get into like the mental mindfulness aspect of really of what should be your priority, the first thing. And no matter what, even if you've been doing CrossFit for as long as I have, it's you want to prioritize like, are you feeling the movement the way it's supposed to be felt? And then we talk about like range of motion. Are you doing a movement to a quote unquote movement standard, right? And also being like, when it comes to just mobility is the number one thing, with being able to perform with range of motion that doesn't cause dysfunction or pain. And then we look at stability, like your ability to like hold different positions, be in a position statically with strength, for example, like whether it's the bottom of the squat or we just talk about like tempo, that's why we do a lot of tempo training. It's because we're really dialing in those mindfulness aspects to movement. Like you have to really think about how you control a movement on the lowering or how you might hold a movement if it's an isometric for a set amount of time. And when we do those, you start to create this idea of exertion, like what your ability is to like complete that task as it's written. And there's a tool that I've used a lot in the past, haven't used as often with the program, but it's called RPE, which is rate of perceived exertion. And to be quite honest, like I would love to just, and maybe I will at some point, just write a whole program where you're never going to see RX or scale for like a whole month or a whole phase. It just go by your rate of like literally like the exertion level of a set of 1 to 10. So let's just say, for example, 1 could be like you could do a bunch of reps, no rest, easy, not breathing as hard, walk in the park. And 10 is being like your full on maximal effort. You would need a lot of rest. It's probably not sustainable. And working with that chart's really important. Usually a lot of the time we want to work on like that 6, 7, 8 on those charts, maybe sometimes 5 in there. But those are like the numbers that are sustainable but are allowing us to push into that achievable cliff. And yeah, I just think about, if all the workouts were set at RPE or like what you're able to achieve, based on like your ability to move, your ability to know your pacing, know your strength, know your stability, like that's really where I would go for all of you. Now that's sticky because like that's doesn't necessarily set a bar for you guys, right, with RX and all those things. So let's just say for an example, okay, I'm kind of talking here, but let's give you guys an example of like workouts I personally love to write when it comes to like conditioning, for example, the metabolic stuff. So let's just say we do an EMOM, and so whatever, X amount of minutes, but it's like movement 1, work for 45 seconds. It's like it's time-based versus rep-based is what I'm trying to get at. So 40 seconds, rest or whatever. And the reason why I like working with time-based workouts for conditioning and, or complete the max amount of reps in the remaining time when you guys see that is because you got to really know and be aware of what your perceived exertion of threshold is that you can sustain.
Yeah.
And depending on what that stimulus is for the day, depending on what we want to achieve, but usually it's like something that's repeatable. And the reason why I like that is because you really got to know like your body, you got to know your ability to perform, and you got to know how you're going to approach these movements in a way that's going to allow you to, get what you need to get from the workout. And so I would, if I could, I would rate workouts all the time, because also, like, you could be walking in here and you could just be feeling like crappy, like your exertion level that day, perceived exertion could be, just, it needs to come down a few notches. Maybe it's not what it normally would be because you have a lot of stress going on in your life. You have, maybe you didn't get enough sleep, maybe you didn't eat fuel as well. And it really becomes relative to you for that day. And we could use perceived exertion, which we basically do here, like we're doing our squats today, just as moderate. So like you have to have your own awareness of like what's gonna feel like for you, that you can do 5-second lowers, good quality reps for 4 reps. So yeah, just kind of going back to the overall idea of what I'm tangenting about here is like perceived exertion is really where we're trying to get at the majority of the time. Like you being aware of what you're capable of.
Yeah, I think if you did a program that was strictly all RPE, like I think that would be the most like mindful practice, because it's not easy to do that. And like I was saying, like if someone walks in here for the first time, like they would see that and like it takes a while to figure out like how, because every movement also is different for everybody. Like, for example, someone's super tall, long legs, like hopping on the road, probably no problem. But then if you get someone who's shorter legs, shorter torso, it's like the RPE for the row is going to be significantly higher. So it does become a bit of a mindfulness practice, just like learning, first of all, your body, and second of all, how when you move your body in specific ways, it responds. And I think that it's important to be patient with yourself, because sometimes it takes time to understand that. Like you're not going to learn that immediately. You just have to be in here consistently doing the work to really learn like, oh, like this is how I respond. These are my strengths. These are my weaknesses. This is what I need to work on. This is what I feel confident with. It takes time.
Totally. And our goals are always going to shift as we age, we go through life, and we're kind of looking at this from this longevity perspective too. It's like, setting a threshold, like we talked about sport last week, and achieving, but also being in that positive state where your relationship with movement, your relationship with fitness is allowing you to have, again, this holistic improvement in yourself. But yeah, I mean, I might be giving myself some ideas of like, maybe I should write a whole phase and work a program that's all perceived exertion stuff. Yeah, I could probably do it. Maybe I'll do it for you guys this upcoming December, because that's like our transition month as we get into the open. Maybe it's a little bit inconsistent. Maybe working out's not going ham is our priority. We just want to move because we're trying to, probably most of you guys are trying to burn off all your calories from sweets and extra Christmas cookies and maybe boozing too much for some of you. But I also just want to come back to like just detaching from the RX mentality. That's one of the reasons why I would really do it. But also like, I see it all the time. I mean, I'll program some of those workouts where it's like a lot of just like maxing the remaining time. Mm-hmm. I think it would be really hard for a lot of people, because how many times do you see it? Like, and you guys listening probably know, like you get all excited, the first round, and you do, 27 reps of whatever. And then the next time you go to it, it's like 13.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, you didn't break it up enough. Like you didn't maybe use the loading, right? You didn't scale the right weight. Or maybe it's just too much. Maybe they're doing too many reps. But like kind of coming back to using this awareness and RP of learning how to strategize your movement, strategize your reps, strategize your workouts. That makes you more aware athlete, and we're not attached to RX, attached to accumulating set amount of reps of a movement or set amount of calories on the bike or the rower. And maybe that might allow us to have a better mentality of like knowing who we are and how we work out, and not have to be so attached to like, this is the weight that you have to do, and this is the reps that you have to do, and this is the speed or time that you have to achieve. So yeah, I'm just kind of giving myself an idea here, y'all. So stay tuned. RPE month coming at you. All right. Cool. Let's talk about some examples. So we're talking a lot about scaling, right? These workouts, all these things. We should probably talk about like this infinite scalability and what that's like. And I think for a majority of the time we give you maybe like one or two things to modify. So let's just say, for example, we're doing our rings today and we're practicing, a false grip, which is really hard. It takes a lot of wrist mobility, shoulder, forearm stability. So, obviously the best thing you could possibly do, if you're, RX plus athlete, is you're like doing false grip on the high rings, maybe pulling to the top, and you're holding this for like 30 seconds, or maybe doing some slow lowers to the lockout, right? Maybe you're just trying to hang for a false grip and then you slip, right? That's okay, that's scaling. That's you being relative of holding the false grip as long as you can until you slide out of it. Then we're maybe doing some assistant on the high rings where we have a box, we have the false grip, doing some vertical work, but having something to assist your legs, maybe doing some scap. And hey, maybe all that's too tough, maybe mobility's not there, I gotta scale it, go to the low rings. Maybe I'm just practicing holding with a false grip with a very challenging position. Maybe I need to walk back a little bit. Maybe there's the false grip's not happening, and maybe we just work with the regular grip. That's maybe like you're super new, just lack any of that mobility right now, and you just need to work on holding onto the rings, right? And even that could go further. Maybe it's, someone that just has trouble like hanging on the rings. If it's like, different from degree but not kind. Olympic athletes to their grandparents. Maybe it's Mama Cuckoo that I got in here, which she can hang on the rings pretty dang good. She's got good grip strength. But like, maybe it's holding on the dumbbells and doing carries, right? And just working on grip strength. I mean, we do a lot of that here. But like you notice, we went all the way from like high rings to just holding weights in your hands. So all of these have a balance to like being a competitive athlete to like somebody who just needs to work on their longevity of like having that day-to-day function of like picking something up and holding it and moving it from point A to point B.
And what's really interesting about scaling is what you mentioned, like going from this level to another level, it could look completely different, but like that stimulus is still the same, whether it's like working on your grip strength, working on midline strength, working on pulling capacity, pushing capacity. Like, we'll have people, if anyone has any kind of like nagging injury or something going on physically, they see a workout where they're like, let's say they have it's a workout that's very hanging heavy, right? And they have, they tweak their wrist and they can't hang. And that still show up. Like, you were just talking about how the skier could be a good substitution for pull-ups. Like, it really is infinite, and you just have to like get rid of that idea that like a movement has to look like this for me to get the stimulus. Like, you could do it a lot of different ways, and part of it is just trusting the coaches to guide you towards that.
And keep in mind, we're going to coach and demonstrate the class as, those difficult variations. Like, we have to have conversations with you. Like, it's our job to come to you and make sure you're scaling. But, how do you find that balance of when is it the time for me to like try that new thing or try that more difficult progression? Or maybe you're just like having that thing and like just pull us aside and be like, hey, like I really need something new. Like, we have members that do that all the time. Rhonda will say, oh, my shoulder's is really hurting today. Like, I need something different. But I'll be like, hey, are you willing to try this? Like, you gotta have, some people just have to have the ability to try new things. And so, if you're curious, like, pull us aside. So I think a lot of members kind of, you guys maybe sometimes do get stuck, and it's just ask us like, hey, do you think I'm ready to try this? Yeah. Like, that's one of the best things you can do. And like, we can also go up to you and be able to push you of saying, hey, I want you to try this. But usually it's gonna be a little bit more successful if it goes the other way, because you're in that mentality to now try something versus like that mentality being put into you. And this is kind of where I work on myself as a coach, where I want to see members have this mindfulness and self-awareness of having this. It kind of goes into my spiritual philosophy, how we have this inner wisdom of healing, this inner wisdom of improving. And you have that within you to be your own coach to an extent of like knowing like, okay, like I think I'm ready, like coach, like do you think I can try this? We've had some members that recently have come up to me and like, oh, hey, can you help me try this? I'll be like, yeah, let's do it. And if I don't think you're ready, I'll tell you. Like, hey, like I think we need to, let's stick with this for this week.
Yeah.
Then we'll get to that, false grip, pulling, hanging on the rings. So we also do get a lot that are just, just clearly unrealistic with goals. I think that happens a lot because we get excited. Like, oh, hey, I'm ready for a muscle up. Now, for you, let's talk about right now. If you guys want to do a muscle up, you need to be able to do at least 5 strict dead hang chest to bar pull-ups, 5 strict full range of motion dips, like all the way down, all the way up. Being able to practice transitioning on the low rings, being able to pull across your chest, pull and dip out. You got to understand how to do kipping pull-ups with extending your hips and your midline. So there's a lot of factors that go into it. And we talked about earlier in the podcast of like skipping steps and all those things. So yeah, just know that it all comes down to really what I'm saying is like you becoming your own self-aware coach that knows where you're at and where you're capable of achieving.
Yeah, and I think one thing to keep in mind with that is even if you're not quite ready to move up to like a true RX progression, if you are feeling like you're kind of stuck or stagnant in the movement, then that is also an opportunity to look up a different way of trying things. Like you could go from, a scale to scale. For example, like if you're still working on your pull-ups, if you only do ring rows, like it's probably not, you want to diversify, right? Like you want to try different things. Like, if there's a reason why you include in the stimulus, like jumping pulling reps, just to kind of get over certain plateaus. So you also like be willing to try different things, try new scales, and if you just kind of stay in that same comfort zone over and over again, it is hard to kind of break out of it. So, we'll do a lot of that, but also too, like feel free to come up to us and be like, hey, like, I'm looking for something new just to feel a little bit different as I'm doing this.
Yeah, I do notice, I think the most part is like, members will get, nervous to ask, so just put that out there. And it's also funny you brought up the jumping, pulling, just to talk about, skill development, and we talked about last week with sport, like learn and play new sports and try new things. And, I'll just look at like that progression for myself. Like I can do muscle ups all the time, but like, can I do a jumping bar muscle up from a challenging distance? Those things are valuable. I just personally, this is my biased opinion, but I present to the community is like, even if we have, how do we look at things that we can do RX and maybe quote unquote scale it in a way that creates actually a more challenging stimulus?
Yeah.
Is a new skill. Those are things I look at a lot. I think it just comes down to the whole element of why we come to this gym to begin with this program is to be able to have variance, to be able to have a variety of capabilities of performing things. Whether if that's, using the landmines for the barbell versus like a traditional Olympic lift. The reason why we do that is because there's also a whole neurological benefit that comes into that. Or just a lot of non-traditional stuff. Like today we did Pendlay rows, instead of, I could have done easily like pull-ups. And so like, yeah, quote unquote, as a community, we were quote unquote scaling maybe something really difficult, but in reality, we were just getting a different stimulus with a bar row that was more dynamic.
Yes.
Like basically, if that movement would translate similar to a kipping pull-up. Yeah. It's a dynamic hip drive, leg drive into a pull. So I'll throw things in there like today where like most of the people can do the workout quote unquote prescribed as it's written, and then I'll have a non-traditional movement in there that maybe gives you a similar stimulus to something that is more high skill development or base, but also like I can get a lot out of that Pendlay row by adding weight to the bar that's going to challenge me to, get that. So yeah, just kind of giving you guys an idea of like what goes on in my mind. Not saying, what I think of is the best, but I just try to put a lot of thought into that, and I see it for myself. Like, I also think about, I do the workouts and classes with you guys, so I think about how that's going to, provide that stimulus, and I'll do my workouts and be like, oh, hey, we hit it, or no, this needed some tweaking.
Yeah, and also the ability to diversify movements and not get stuck into like a very dogmatic pattern of like going through your pulling, going through your squatting, going through your hinging. That's what allows this to be infinitely scalable, and like that's what allows for anyone to show up and try a class.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's why there's no preparation needed. Like if you know how to move your body in a functional way, which as a human being you innately know how to do, like you're prepared to do class in some capacity.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's why we always say like you don't have to prepare, you don't have to get in shape. Like you're capable of doing some version of this, whether it's the Olympic athlete, whether it's the grandma version,
Mm-hmm.
some version. Like if you can move, like you can do it, and that's why.
Yeah, and it really does apply to everyone that wants to, think about how they want to develop a relationship with movement. And again, I just come back to Greg Glassman and his mentality. And I'm not like a diehard Glassman, old school CrossFit coach, we'll call him coach still. And I just truly respect his mentality and his mind, especially where he's going now with his new program and how he's really working on, bringing this mentality of fitness for health. And that's really where we should come back to as our why. And that's how all this really applies to everybody and everything. Like, do you come in here for your true why being like, I want to be healthier outside of the gym? And we do all these fun skills, performance metrics, but if our relationship in here mentally is stuck and attached egoically to doing things prescribed and feeling like we have to be achieved, like the workouts will have things written, but detach from that, right? That's going to be the challenge, I think, for all of us too, me and myself too. And I've really just kind of let a lot of that stuff go, even though I can perform a lot, and even though I can perform obviously the workouts I rate here, but this is still a minimal threshold of like what CrossFit athletes are really doing, or programs and gyms. So for you, like I just said, like for me, I'll just talk about myself, for example. Like my why here is to really just to feel more fulfilled energetically and purposefully when I leave these doors, to be a better human. Just in terms of a positive mindset, and also to have more energy. And when I coach a class, I'm just like, when I think about one thing I've thought about recently with my progress as a coach, actually not as much coaching as like the ability to like demonstrate as I move.
Yeah.
One of the biggest struggles for me was like performing movements like without like being in like some sort of like tightness or pain, and like as I prioritize movement and longevity and all these things, I've noticed a really good mental progression in myself. So yeah, everybody can do it. Friends can do it. Your grandparents can do it. It's obviously a little different when it's a group-oriented experience. But yeah, it all comes down to you.
Yeah. Now, if you have that mindset, like the black and white numbers will come. Like your ability to do something RX, it's going to come. Just having that growth mindset, having that just like reflective perspective of, how am I personally growing from this? How am I changing in a positive way? If you detach from, like, it's an interesting thing. Like, if you detach from that RX mentality, that's how you'll get closer to actually being able to do things RX.
That's true.
Yeah, so that's a good piece of advice to end with.
Yeah, I love it. It's the concept and notion that I talk about with like, spirituality is like, to become in more control, you got to let go of control. You got to learn to let go. And, you know, some of these mindsets and thoughts that aren't serving you will actually, when you detach from those, you'll become closer to like you understanding your true self and who you are and being in control of everything and anything in your life. But maybe that's a topic we'll talk about next week, especially as, you know, we're getting closer to some more societal concepts within our communities, and talk about like you being in control is maybe somewhere I want to segue into next week. So yeah, this week we just wanted to keep it simple, talk about scaling, talk a little bit more about, you know, the gym experience, and, you know, making it more relative for you, because this is truly a beautiful way of incorporating fitness. Obviously biased for both of us. So, but yeah, we'll tune in next week and we'll talk more about some other topics. So thank you guys for tuning in. All right, love you guys, appreciate you guys. All right, we will see you next week.